आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। गुकारस्त्वन्धकारो वै ऋकारस्त्वनिवर्तकः अन्धकारनिरोधित्वात् गुरुरित्यभिधीयते। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। So let us chant verses number 12 and 13, which we will do today. 12 we did last time, so let's chant both of them. Number 12. Sa eva maya parimohitatma shariram asthaya karoti sarvam. Asthaya. Sa eva maya parimohitatma shariram asthaya karoti sarvam. Striyannapanadi vichitra bhogaihi sa eva jagrat paritriptameti. Striyannapanadi vichitra bhogaihi sa eva jagrat paritriptameti. Number 13. Swapne sa jivaha sukha dukha bhokta swamayaya kalpita jiva loke. Swapne sa jivaha sukha dukha bhokta swamayaya kalpita jiva loke. Sushupti kale sakale viline tamo bhibhutaha sukha rupameti. Sushupti kale sakale viline tamo bhibhutaha sukha rupameti. So in the last class we had seen that each of the living beings, at least the human beings, has three states of experiences that it cycles through. It's interesting how this creation was made by Ishvara, that it's all structured very well. So the rotation of the earth and the rotation of the earth is such that there is light during the day and darkness during the half of the year. So of course changes because of the seasons. Um, you know, it's interesting. I'm very cognizant of that these days because I put some solar panels on the ground last year, and it was quite a bit of investment, but hopefully it would pay off over a period of time. And so when I uh, commissioned it back in October, the daylight was 10 hours and the and darkness was 14 hours. And now, and so my electric um, generation was much less. And I used to measure it. It's, you know, being engineer, I have a spreadsheet, and this is one of my hobbies. I don't have any major hobbies per se, just be some small trivial things. And so I would measure what the electricity generation is. And I don't have the exact figures, but now the daylight is about 13 hours and the night is 11 hours. It'll probably go up to quite a bit more. And the electricity has improved a lot. The generation has improved a lot. Anyway, so going back to the structure by Ishvara, the earth rotates so that you have half the time light and the half time darkness. And this is also coupled by the fact that during the light time, there is what is called the waking experience. And during night time, there is the dream and sleep experience. And the funny part is that each one of us cycles through each one of them on a 24-hour period. So the 24-hour period is quite significant, really. And so that is the totality of our lives. And so it's like, you know, you have a circle that is moving forward. And so we are experiencing these three states of experience throughout our life in the repetitive 24-hour period, 24-hour pattern rather. So here number 12 that we did last week talked about what happens in the daytime. I mean, you can even sleep during the daytime, but normally that is an exception. But during the daytime, you are awake. What happens in that state? So we looked at that. So this is what is called you fully awake. Sometimes this is what the Shastra also says in the dream, which we are going to do today on number 13. It is half awake. And during sleep, it is fully asleep. So the dream is half awake, but the waking state is fully awake. In the fully awake, what do you mean by fully awake? In the fully awake period, we are completely identified with our gross, our subtle, and our causal bodies. So those are the three constraining aspects to us, and each one of them has its own laws, but I am fully identified with all three of them. In the dream state, which we are going to study in a minute, we are only identified partially with them, not fully with them. So as a result, the waking state has much more stability. Even though they are pretty much the same, but they have more stability, more recognition, more continuity, more luster than the dream state. Because I'm identified with all three of those bodies, so-called bodies, sharira. And so sthula sharira, sukshma sharira, and karana sharira. Each one of us is embodied with these three bodies. Okay, so that was the waking state. And so, it's interesting. One way to look at that is that, and I think I've given this example for those of you that have been with me for a while, you will recognize, and I am fond of looking at it that way. Okay? So you have sometimes you get these fake jewelry, artificial jewelry. Artificial jewelry you can immediately tell because they're very light. Okay, they kind of look okay, but they're very light. And all it takes is some examination to tell this is fake. Because you don't need a jeweler to assess whether it is fake or not. Even a simple person, especially a woman who knows what is real, what is not real in her ornaments, she can easily tell this is fake. And so sometimes you get these fake jewelries for $1 or half $1. Okay? So this is one thing. I remember about 25 years ago, 30 years ago, I don't know when, long time ago, several decades, we were going through San Francisco at that time, and on the Union Square, for those of you that know San Francisco, there is a very famous section called Union Square. And in one side of that, there happened to be a shop that we were just sort of, we were just spending some time looking at things. There was this shop for jewelry. So my wife and I both went there, and the jewelry there was very fine jewelry. Not obviously fake, but very fine jewelry. And the jewelry was, if I can just briefly recall at that time, they were like $50 for one piece, 60 or 75 for another piece, 35 for something else. They're not like for pennies. You have to spend quite a bit of money. But what you found was jewelry that weighed the same as a gold jewelry, but it was gold plated. Now, if you were to scratch it, you will find that really it is not all gold. It is gold plated, but very finely plated. It was impressive, really. We looking at it, my wife and I both were discussing, this is really good stuff that they have. It really looks very fine. You have to pay for it, but it looks very fine. Okay? So now, why do I bring that example? Because both the waking state and the dream state are like an expensive fake jewelry and an inexpensive fake jewelry. And I say this because it is different from a real jewelry. Real jewelry would be where the content is also gold, and the top, it doesn't have to be gold plated. It is all gold. Okay, so that being the case, here's the thing. This is the way, I think, a good way, in my opinion, in my looking at it, good way to look at it is, right now, without thinking, the waking state looks to us to be real. Real meaning that it is solid gold. And the dream state looks to be a fake experience. Why do we say it's a fake experience? Because you get up in the morning, it's gone. So the waking state seems to be the real stuff, and this dream is just sort of on the side. And so the waking state looks like a real jewelry, and the dream state looks like a fake jewelry. When in fact, the waking state is a finely made fake jewelry, and the dream state is a casually made fake jewelry. Both of them are fake. One is made a little better. But compared to the real self, which is gold, they are both fake. This is a good way to look at it. So the waking state is also fake jewelry. But it is well made because I am identified with all three shariras. Complete identification. It looks more real. Anyway, going back to the very structure, very beautiful structure, that we cycle through all three of them. And there are a lot of reasons that Ishvara has it this way. And so the Jagrata Avastha is the one where, excuse me a second. The Jagrata Avastha is the one where I can exhaust my desires in a very meaningful way. It is both a good way for us to lead our life, obtain results that are lasting, but in the process of doing so, we get ensnared in the fact that this is all there is. There is nothing more to it. You just lead your life as best as you can, and then there's time to go. This is exactly what our attitudes are. And so it is a little harder. It looks so real. Kind of like, if you go to this expensive jewelry shop, and by the way, that shop is long gone. If you go to San Francisco, the same shop, you know exactly where it was. I still remember this. It's on the outskirts of where Macy's is still there. And this was on the very bottom floor retail on the corner. That shop is no longer there. But if you were to actually go to the finely made jewelry shop, you would have to do quite a bit of work to make sure that it is fake. Because the weight doesn't change. It is the same as gold. And the plating is so well. Supposing you were to bring it to a jeweler friend, they can tell right away. But you and I may not be able to tell right away. We'd have to have some effort in trying to figure out that it is fake. Same thing is true in our life also. Because of the continuity, because of the solidity, because of its real nature, life becomes very difficult to dissect and to see that it is fake. Fake in the sense that this is not who I am. As we saw, that I'm acting in a play with some costumes and so on and so forth, and I'm very involved with it. And so, but this is not who I am. I am something different than that. That fact is not easy to see. That I am made out of gold, whether or not I'm made out of gold is not as easy to see as it were if it was a fake jewelry. Fake jewelry means that night time when I wake up and so on, it looks like, oh, it's gone. It has nothing to do with me. But waking up from, and this is interesting because in verse number 14, which we will do next time, I don't think we'll have time to go to 14. Maybe we will, but I doubt it. It talks about the process of waking up from the waking state, because the waking state also is a sleepy state. You're not sleepy state in the sense that you don't know the reality of who you are. So for that you have to wake up even more. So that we will do next time. But for the time being, what we have to do is to compare and contrast both the dream state as well as the waking state. And they are both fake. This is what the teaching is. Okay. So both are kind of like, just like a play is also fake. Similarly, these are also fake. Now let's go to verse number 13. Now having done that kind of an introduction. Okay. So let's look at 13. So this is on page 152. Let's just look at the word meanings first and then we will put it together. Swapne. Swapne means in the dream. Saha jivaha. So saha means, saha is a pronoun. Means the person. The person means which person? The same person that was talked about in the waking state on verse number 12. Remember, we saw sa eva maya parimohita atma. So the same person is being talked about. Saha jivaha sukha dukkha bhokta. Bhokta means the experiencer of sukha and dukkha, of joys and lack thereof, sorrows. Sukha dukkha bhokta. Swamayaya, by one's own projecting power. Kalpita jiva loke. Kalpita jiva loke means in the world created by one's own projecting power. Kalpita jiva loke. Okay, so this is the first part of the verse number 13. Describes the dream experience. The second part of the verse 13 describes the deep sleep experience. So now it begins with Shushupti Kale. In deep sleep, Sakale, the entire projection, Viline. Sakale Viline means entire dissolution, merger. Viline means dissolve. Okay. Sushupti Kale Sakale Viline Tamaha Abhibhutaha. One which is overcome by Tamaha. Tamaha means by darkness. The darkness of ignorance. Ignorance is also darkness, isn't it? So, darkness is a physical darkness, whereas ignorance is a mental darkness, isn't it? Because you, just like you don't recognize things in darkness, in ignorance also you don't recognize. You don't know who this person is, so you don't, supposing there's an important person in the room, and you don't know he is an important person, he or she. So therefore you don't talk to them as an important person. This is through ignorance, as a darkness of it. So darkness and ignorance are pretty much the same. So tamaha abhibhutaha, having been overcome by darkness of ignorance here, sukha rupam eti. Eti means to acquire, to attain. Sukha rupam, the nature of happiness. Okay, so that is the description of the deep sleep state. So let's look at the whole sentence. The very same person who we had talked about in the waking state experiences joys and sorrows in one's personal dream world created by one's own projecting power. In the state of deep sleep, when everything is merged, having been overcome by the darkness of ignorance, one attains the nature of happiness. So these two states of the experience, in that cycling through that we talked about, is captured in this verse, both the dream experience and the deep sleep experience. So now let's just visit them and say what needs to be understood. Okay. So in the dream state, the identification with the gross body is given up. But the identification with the subtle body, sukshma sharira, continues. So this is the difference between the waking state and the dream state. The identification with the gross body is discarded, and the identification with the sukshma sharira continues. In the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, it says that the self makes the waking body unconscious. See, we talked about this in the last class. The sleep is a very powerful phenomena. It is not just hiding things. It actually is a very powerful phenomena that hides, that makes your gross body unconscious. Makes it completely unconscious. Somebody can, if you're very in deep sleep, and if you're wearing a watch, somebody can take that watch away from you without your recognizing. Somebody can actually touch you without your touching. Without your feeling, sorry. Swami Vidyatmananda had given this very interesting example. He says, in the Indian, if you ever been to the trains in India, that are so crowded, especially in the third class. I think they have given up the third class now. It used to be in our days there were three classes: first class, second class, and third class. I believe that the third class is now gone. It's only upper class and lower class. The lower class is cheaper, and so most people travel by that. Very crowded. So, as this illustration goes, there were several religious people from different religions that happened to enter this compartment. So there was this Hindu Swami, and the Hindu Swami, he wants to just be on their own. They don't want anybody else to be touching them because it becomes impure. This is one of the beliefs in the religious practices. So there's a Hindu priest, and next to it, there close by, there is a Muslim cleric. Then there is a Christian, and then there is a Sikh, and then there is a Buddhist and a Jain. The 5 or 6 of them, all different religions. And they are all very cognizant of their own selves. They don't want to really touch anybody else, or they're just minding their own business, they're reading something and so on. And as the train goes, because of the rocking motion of the train, they all fall asleep. And one by one, and this is what happens. One person sleeps and the next person, this is why, when you're going in a car, the passenger should not be sleeping because it starts to influence the driver, as you know. So on this train, one by one, they all fell asleep. And he says if somebody took a picture of these priests from the various religions all asleep, they would be shocked. So their hands are in each other's laps. Someone else is kind of like holding on to the backside of it. Someone else is resting on the shoulders of the next one. The Hindu guy is doing on the shoulder of the Muslim person, and so on. They are all kind of semi-intertwined. Why? Because the sleep makes the waking body unconscious. So this is one thing. Then what the sleep does, so sleep does both the hiding as well as creation, avarana and vikshepa. Not only does it hide the gross body, not only does the makes the gross body unconscious as though, but creates a dream body by itself, for itself. So it does two things. One is it discards the sthula sharira, the gross body, but it has to have a body to function in the dream. So it creates a new body for itself. So it is quite proper that for gaining the experience in any one state of experience, the type of what's called the upadhi meanings the instruments for experiencing must be compatible with the nature of the particular experience. So look at this carefully. This is worth really thinking about. So again, whenever you have a state of experience, the instruments for experiencing that state must be compatible with it. Okay, let's give you an example. Take heaven, for instance. And so we have, we in Hindus also have heaven is a very distinct possibility. In fact, we have different kinds of heaven, not just one. So we have beginning heaven and then go up to all the way up to Brahmaloka. 7 up and 7 down. Then the Manushya Loka right in the middle. So we have a lot of heavens. But one of the characteristics of the heaven is different from the experience of the human loka. This is the human loka. I mean, human means all the animals also. So this is the difference. Hindus, as opposed to some of the other religious principles, believe all animals and human beings have the same self, same soul. Whereas in some of the other Christian beliefs, which you know about, the animals don't really have a soul. And so you can eat the animal because there is no papa, no punya. The human beings are the ones who are an exact copy of God, and the animals you can eat animals, it doesn't make any difference. Not so in Hinduism. All of us are really exactly the same, so we are all valuable. Now it's very possible that if you were bitten by a snake, then you should kill the snake. You don't look at the pedigree of it and so on. So that's a different thing. But we all are equally sacred in that manner. So, but in the human existence, let's just call it the human existence, you need to have a gross body. In order to have a gross body, what do you need to have? So you need to be born as a fetus in your mother's tummy, impregnated by a man. And that fetus slowly grows. And in about 9 months' time, it is ready to come out. By that time, it is protected and so on. So it comes out, and then it is not ready to be on its own. It's a baby that has to be protected. So it takes a long time. And imagine a person who's capable of driving and taking care of yourself and studying and being able to cook meals. It takes 20 years for this to happen. Long process. This is the human life. Right? So you need to have a mother. You need to have a father. You need to have a loving family that can go through supporting you for a long time. This is the human experience. Let's look at heaven now. In heaven, our Shastra says the process is completely different. It is not like the human existence where you have to find a mother, father, be born, be protected, be brought up. It doesn't happen that way. You are given a heavenly body right away. And also, unlike the human body where it slowly grows and then starts to peak and then it starts to disintegrate. And you cannot help it. There is a process. You go to the peak and then apakshiyate vinashyati iti. This is the nature of the human one. Whereas in the heavenly experience, there is no such thing as a decay. You are there constant. In fact, it's so interesting. They say that in the dreams, in the heavenly state, there is no sthula sharira. Obviously, there is no sthula sharira. There is some kind of a sukshma sharira which manufactures an identity. And there is no growth through a mother-father. You just suddenly appear on the scene and stay there until it's time for you to go. This is the heavenly one. So in heaven, the experiences of the heaven, which are totally different. So for example, they say in our Shastras that in heaven, there is no hunger, no thirst. Why? Because there is no gross body. And all the physiological functions that support the gross body are not there. So there is no joy of eating. There is no sorrow of hunger and thirst. Because you don't have a sthula sharira. If this looks very strange to you, can we tell you something? This is exactly how the dream experience is. Not exactly, but something like that. Why not exactly? Because in a dream also you don't have complete pleasure. Dream actually is the same thing as a continuation of your waking state. You have sukha dukkha, you have pleasures and pains in the dream. So in that sense, the dream is not like a Swargaloka, because in Swargaloka, a heavenly existence, you have no problems. For a length of time, you have no problems whatsoever. It's just joy, 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 joy. And then at the end of that, when this is karma phala, as a result of your action, you're just enjoying it. It's kind of like going into a resort area, Hawaii, perfect weather and so on. So for a while, you can get up anytime, you can go to the beach. There's no winter, no summer, everything is beautiful. And meals are well taken care of, people are nice, there's not much disturbance and so on. And then all of a sudden it has to be vacated. So on the bottom of your door inside your hotel room there is a reminder, today there is a checkout at 11 o'clock. And if you don't leave, there will be a knock on the door and says, "Sir, Madam, why are you still there? The new guests are coming in." So there is a sudden departure. Okay? So this is exactly what happens in the heavenly state. The same thing happens in the dream, by the way. So don't think, my God, how can that be? How can there be somebody without a gross body? It has to be like, no. This is one of the reasons why this recycling through was invented by Ishvara. Because you can tell exactly what happens. You can create a dream body. So the dream body, just look at it. The dream body does not need a mother and a father. Doesn't need 20 years for it to be functional. The moment you start dreaming, bam, you are a person. You have some alternate dream character. And the dream character is, even though it is fake, it doesn't look like it's fake. You have the same samadukha. That's exactly what it says. Swapne cha diva, look at the first line. Sukha-dukkha bhokta. So there also you have karma phala. And so I'm very cognizant of the fact that really speaking, in the dream also you have problems. Sometimes you could wake up in the morning and you have to sort of rub your eyes and say, oh my gosh, did I have to go through this? I don't know about you, but in my dream, the main thing that underlines my personal dreams is search, search, not being able to find exactly. This is what the whole study of Vedanta is. It's a search. And to the extent that we're still searching, understanding. So the dream also is the same way, searching. I find myself, I will go there and say, I think I've seen this before. No, but I'm not quite there yet. Different scenarios and so on. But the main, at least in my dream, the main thing is search. I remember when I was much younger in India, I would have awful dreams about snakes. And very awful. Snakes, all this, that, or the other. And I don't know if it was the advice of somebody or did it on my own, I can't remember, but I finally got rid of all that. And I remember the reason how I did it. Before going to sleep, I will actually think of the snakes, imagine them, and I would say, you know what, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. If that happens, and of course the snake dreams used to be because we were really surrounded by real snakes where we were living in this jungly-like area. My father was a mining manager, and there was our house, our bungalow was in the middle of a very foresty area, and we would see snakes all over the place. That's how the dreams came about. But then I confronted it. I remember I must have been about 16, 17, or I don't remember that kind of an age. And then slowly the dreams went away. Anyway, what I'm saying is that the dreams are no different than the Jagrata Avastha, waking state. They also have Sukha Dukkha Bhokta. But the Sukha Dukkha is only there when you are a dream character. So you have a invented body. You have an identity, a dream identity. So you are the one who is searching. You are the one who is disappointed. You are the one who is confused. You are the one who is given some strange treatment by others in the dream. You as the person. And this person was manufactured quickly. Not through slow birth and growth or anything like that. So exactly this is what happens in the Swargaloka also, in the heavenly existence also. Suddenly you are given something. So there is a great deal of similarity between the dress. The main thing is, and this is part of, I think, the whole creation by Ishvara, that you should be able to visualize. You cannot say, oh, I wonder what this... You look at all these descriptions of the heavenly existence and there is no gross body. So they say that really in the Swargaloka there is music. So just like even in our life also, having physical pleasures like eating, is not the only source of pleasure. So for example, when you're listening to music, some nice song or somewhere that really appeals to you, there's no physicality about it. It's something in your own mind that you just have joy. So similarly in the heavenly existence also, you don't need a physical body. There are lots of other ways of really feeling good and bad also, because they say that in the in heavenly existence also there is competition. You want to be closer to Vishnu, sitting close to it, and you'll say, why is that person sitting there? I think I've given you this very interesting example that Swami Dayananji had once given long time ago. He just made us laugh so much. That was one of his favorite jokes. So if you don't mind, I'll spend a couple of minutes on that joke just to illustrate this point. So it appears that there was an old nice person in New Delhi who used to teach Gita classes, and he was told that if you teach Gita classes all your life, then you will reach heaven and you'll have a very good existence in heaven. So the poor guy just took it to heart, and he was teaching Gita, he was learning Gita, and then he started teaching and so on. And he didn't really have a lot of people that would come to his house for learning, but a few people came, and they were all old people, and they all were chanting Gita and attending his classes. So when he died, so the king of heaven is Indra. So he was given a very beautiful place in heaven, and he said, "Oh my God, I'm so happy. I put all that effort in heaven, in my existence, and now I'm really given this beautiful place. I'm very happy. Thank you, Indra." And one day he decided he's just going to go around and check out his neighborhood to see who else is here. So this is all about the Sukha Dukkha. So Sukha Dukkha is there also, but mostly it is Sukha. Occasionally there is some Dukkha. How? So he was going around the neighborhood, and he found that there was a much bigger house with many more attendants, and instead of a car, the fellow has a helicopter. And in fact, like just watching the person, he sits down in the helicopter, and the helicopter takes him away, and he's waving goodbye and so on, and I'm stuck with the car. So he says, there's something wrong. There's something not wrong, but he says, I want to find out if I did some teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, what this person must have done. Then he saw the person who was riding in the helicopter, who is the owner of this place. He says, oh my goodness, I cannot believe it. It is the same disheveled person who never used to shave very much, never took a bath, and he was the driver of this open van. Open van means that there is, this is one of those motorcycles that has some places for people to sit and so on and so forth, has a van behind it. They often do it in the railway station from New Delhi. And every morning he would find that they're supposed to have only 4 or 5 people, but 12, 14 people would be sitting there on top of each other. And the guy is crazy. He's driving in and through the traffic and saying bad things to people and this, that, or the other. He's that guy. He's that same guy that he could tell him. He said, I was teaching Gita very nicely and so on, and this guy overcharges people, did everything wrong. He is the owner of this huge property with a helicopter. He says, oh my God, something is wrong with this whole picture. So he goes to Indra and says, I need to talk to you. Indra already knew what he was talking about. He says, come, please sit down. What's up? What's bothering you? He says, I was happy when I first entered the Swargaloka, but after looking at my neighbor, I am completely confused. This guy, forget about teaching Gita, he was the one who was one of the worst characters in our neighborhood. He made everybody, he cheated and so on, and drank like a fish. And you are making him, he says, I know what I, he says, sit down. He says, here's the thing. When I was allocating properties to people and making a heaven, I had to get some guidelines from my teacher, Brihaspati. Brihaspati is the teacher of heavens. And so he's the one who designed the heaven. And Indra is just a king. He's the kind of like a controller of the heaven, but the real designer, the boss, is Brihaspati. So Brihaspati said, here is how I would like you to allocate properties. Very simple. You count the number of people that anyone has created who did not believe in God but now believes in God. Is that clear, Indra? Indra says, let me understand this. So, if a person has created the faith in God 4 times, then I give him this kind of a property. If he has created 100 times, then I have to do this bigger property. Is that right? Brihaspati says, you got it. That's it. That's what you do. So he was telling this Brahmin who was teaching Gita. He says, I have a complete report on how many people you have really convinced that their God exists. And he says, you won't be very happy about it, but let me tell you, there is only 5 people in your life. You've been teaching for 60 years. Most of them I already had they just wanted to come in, and you did not really convince people who did not really believe in God. They were mostly tired and so on. I know I'm being critical of you, but this is a fact. Because I have a complete report. 5 people you have converted into belief of God. Okay? Can I tell you something? You see this disheveled guy? He creates 5 new people to God every time he goes from one railway station to their destination. 5 people every time. And he must have done this like 100 times. So minimum of 500 people he has converted. What do you want me to do? I have to follow the instructions of Brihaspati. And this is all I have to do. This disheveled guy, he was such a crazy driver that the people, the 14 people that he would overload his small truck with, were there saying, oh my God, there has to be a God who has saved us. Today I thought we were going to There was traffic coming in from the other side and he was going to hit them, and the very last minute he would change, and they said, oh my God, there has to be a God that saved us. There's nothing else. Oh Ishvara, I know I never believed in you, but now I know after today's journey. So in heaven also there is Sukha Dukkha. There is no such thing as Sukha alone. So just like in the dream. So in that case, the dream and the heaven and hell, by the way, both of them, hell and heaven, both of them, are identical. How identical? Because, or are similar, I wouldn't say identical, but similar in the sense that the identification with the Sthula Sharira is not there. It's only Sukshma Sharira. Pleasures and pains are all mental, just like in a dream. This is exactly what happens. So, another thing about the dream, by the way, is unlike the waking state, where each jiva actually performs actions thoughtfully, maybe wrongly at times, but thoughtfully, with sankalpa. I am going to do this. That kind of a thoughtful action. And as a result of those thoughtful actions, you create new punya and papa. Punya papa means good actions and bad actions, results of good actions and bad actions. And so there are, as you know, in life, there's just three kinds of variations of good and bad actions. One is, whatever I'm expected to do, I do it. Bad results, and you don't have any overly good results either. Whatever your station in life is, you will accomplish that. As opposed to that, if you're supposed to do something and you neglect doing it, you will incur some bad results. It will come to you. So supposing you borrow money from someone and you don't repay it back, sooner or later this will hurt you. You're expected to, your friend has had a medical emergency and is in the hospital, and it is important for you to go visit that person. You don't do it. These are all bad actions. So it will create some kind of a result for you, all according to the normal structure of karma and karma phala. The good one is when you are not really expected to contribute, but you do some contribution. Initiative-based actions create very good results. You do things that are expected of you, you get some. But if you do things that are unexpected through your own volition, that's excellent. So in the waking state, this is the situation. In the dream state, because you don't have this commitment to action, there is no new karmas created in the dream state. Instead, there is only the exhaustion of previous karmas, like it is in the waking state. So the exhaustion, which is called bhoktritvam, bhokta. Bhokta means the status of enjoyment or suffering. That is identical. But the kartritvam in the dream state is not there. So that's one difference. So I think we have pretty much covered the dream state. Oh, one other thing really. So the dream state is created by previous impressions from your waking state. Vasanas that are left, impressions that are left in your mind, allow you to combine various things and come up with new ideas. Swami Dayanand used to say that. He says, sometimes in the waking state, you cannot see a human being with horns on their head. Yeah, that's not possible. There's no something where you suddenly find there's a baby born with horns on their head. You only see horns on animals. But in the dream state, it is possible for you to juxtapose the horns from an animal and a human form into something that has horns on the human form. That's possible. It's all possible from the previous experiences, so on. In fact, it is said in the Vasanas, in the Shastras, it is very possible. You see, before I say that, in the waking state, you don't have any memories of your previous life. Except in some special cases where it's not supposed to be that way, but there is an exception to the rule. Always happens. So there are so many cases. There are books written on it with carefully researched examples where people could remember the details from their previous life. There's a very, I read about this, there's like a 5-year-old boy. 5-year-old boy, he started, as soon as he started talking and so on, he started saying, "Where are my children?" So people said, "What are you talking about? What children?" He says, "I used to have 3 children. Where are they? Where's my wife?" And then the mother and father took him to some holy person and says, "What's going on here? He's serious about this." So the holy person, holy person means one who deals with all these kinds of crazy ideas and so on. He actually followed the instructions, and they found there was some village where there was a death of a person 5 years ago, and then it's most likely is the same person as this person. So anyway, in the waking state, you don't have a memory of your previous life. And that is also by design, because it is hard enough for us to keep up with our current life. To be burdened with previous life is even more difficult, or not possible. In the dream state, Shastra says, it is, even though very unlikely, but it is possible that some of the vasanas and impressions that are creating the dream experience could be from your previous life. Anyway, so with that, the dream state is now over. Let's briefly talk about the deep sleep state, and then we are pretty much done with this. I hope I can finish this in verse number 13. In the deep sleep state, your identification with the subtle body is also not there. So you see, this is interesting. If you look at this, there are 3 states, 3 bodies. So in the waking state, you have identification with all 3. In the dream state, you have identification with only two. In the deep sleep state, you have identification with only the Karana Sharira, causal body, not with the other two. So in the deep sleep state, you lack any projection. And projection is the nature of Sukha Dukkha, pleasure and pain. Those are absent, and you are only back to what your nature itself is, which is Ananda. You're not covering it by some false identification with body and mind. In fact, you are not covering it with anything other than ignorance. So the implication of this state of the deep sleep is you are not bothering about any extra problems because of your vasanas. So you are already you are already gold anyway. So you're not identifying with this is not a good ornament or it is a good ornament. You are not identifying with anything. You are identifying with your own basic nature, which is gold. In here it is Satchidananda. But one difference. There is a curtain of complete ignorance. Complete ignorance. You have no idea that you are, in fact, the very substratum of happiness. You are the very source of happiness. You are happiness. You are Ananda. You are joyful. There's no other joy as it in deep sleep. But you are ignorant of it. And the complete waking state, which we will see next time, is where not only are you Ananda, but you are aware of it. So this is the deep sleep state. I will end with only one other thing that I will talk about. And this is an interesting and important thing for us to see. There is not that much difference between deep sleep and death. Just like we saw that there was not much difference between a dream state and a heaven or hell, similarly we can state there is not that much difference between deep sleep and death. Both of them consist of no projection. Both of them are the sense of just Ananda, just the basic nature of ourselves. Both of them. The only difference is, so this is where you have a non-manifestation, non-projection. The only difference between deep sleep and death is that in deep sleep, when the past karmas propel you to wake up, because the past karmas are still stored in your background and they have to be fructified. Punya papa, they have to be fructified. So this is the reason why no matter how much you want to sleep in the morning, something which says get up, get up. I have one of our granddaughters, she's playing she's playing some volleyball for her high school. In fact, she's today, they are in Sacramento. And so I pick her up from the practice, and it is grueling. They have to play 5 different matches every day. Each match can go up to 3 sets possibly. 15 sets of banging and so on and so forth. They get so tired. And I often tell her, I says, what time, how much time do you go to sleep? She says, I don't get enough sleep. So she has to go home, quickly eat, and then do some homework, and then get up in the morning at 5 o'clock. It's just amazing. 15 years of age. So I ask her, I says, on weekends do you sleep in? She says, yes, I catch up. So we were asking, my wife was asking her, what time do you wake up in the morning? She says, well, by the time I go to sleep on weekends, it's about 10, 11. She says, sometimes I don't get up before 10 or 11. And so what happens, because I'm sure that she could even sleep more, but there is an internal clock of karmas which says, wake up, time to get up. So when they wake up from the deep sleep, the bodies that they were projecting before they went to sleep are still intact. Heart is still working, lungs are working, pancreas is working, kidneys are working, blood flow is working, prana is working. And so they come back to the same body. In death, the body is gone. You cannot go back to it. It's not functional anymore. So you now have to find a new one. New one how? Unless you go to Swargaloka, which is a possibility, if you've done some excellent karmas in your previous life, you have to again find a mother and a father and go take a birth and grow up. Same thing. That's the only difference. Only difference between deep sleep and death is that here the body is reusable and therefore you have to find a new one. But the experience itself is identical. This is what death is, really speaking. And so it goes through all over, the whole cycle all over again in the next life. And if you want to really not have to go through this experience of 9 months in the womb and 15, 17 years of finally becoming an adult, you can wake up while you are still alive. And so that we will do in the next class, in verse number 14. But with this, all 3 states of experiences, which is waking, dream, and deep sleep, are now covered in this Kaivalya Upanishad. So with that, I close the class, say a prayer, and then we will see if you have any questions. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. It's interesting. Both of you, Barbara and Shanti Kumar, made the same thing. Takes a ride in Hyderabad, and Barbara says stronger after taking rides in Pune. Yeah, this is true, really. Sometimes you feel God saved us. I don't know how I did it. Swamiji used to, I remember one time, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. So one time there was talks in the temple in Fremont that we had arranged. And so it turns out my parents were also with me at that time. And I drove Swamiji back from the talks in Fremont, at the Fremont Temple, actually, back to our home. And my mom and dad were also there in the back seat. Swamiji was sitting in the passenger seat next to me, and I was driving. And Swamiji started talking about this particular joke. I am not kidding you. I was laughing so hard. And he has I cannot really describe the way he puts all the salt and pepper into it. And I could not, I was laughing so hard I almost lost control of the car. I still remember this. I had to, I was just, it was so funny. And Swamiji made this, he said, you think that heaven is a pleasant experience? He says, jealousy and competition and so on you don't need a gross body for that. It's not as though you're going someplace and this often happens. You have a much stronger person who just sets you aside and goes forward. So those are physical problems. These are all mental problems that can give you as much of sukha dukkha as anything else. And he says those are all there in the heaven. I remember that so well. Says people say God exists in India. Well, God exists everywhere, but you're right. It's so funny if you go to India. I would imagine that if you're from the West going to India for the first time, you don't know how this country functions. There's such chaos, such overcrowding, lack of structure, and so on. People are just driving everywhere and so on, and yet it happens. So it can only happen with God's help, I think. You're right. India is a very interesting place. You know, it's there's no obvious discipline and so on, but there is at the deeper level there is, and there's a lot of love and a lot of shraddha towards Ishvara. I think if you were to, in fact, they have done surveys of this, that the most pious people in the world are from India. Pious in the sense that if you look, if you just interviewed some randomly at some person and said, "What do you think is their God?" they'll say, "Of course." Very few people are really atheists. Uh, they may not say where it is and so on, but there is a certain shraddha towards it. So yeah, that's interesting. Okay, let's see if there's any other. Maithili says, I think many people in the whole world believe in God as we survive COVID-19. Very true. Yeah, COVID-19 was probably a very deliberate action by God. And as everything else is, there's nothing outside of a very deep meaning, a deep purpose, and so on. Good or bad. So, yeah. All right. Everybody have a good rest of the weekend, and we'll see you next week, hopefully.